Okay, let's get started. It is time to start. This is the NetConf 122 session. I'm Kent Watson, and my co-chair Per Anderson is online. And joined with me at the desk is Mahesh, our AD. Interestingly enough, this is a rather small room. I think, last time in Dublin, it was probably the largest room I've ever seen or had the NetConf session in, and quite possibly this is the smallest room I've ever had the NetConf session in. So interesting. Of course, it doesn't affect those who are online. Yes. Okay. So note well. This is the standard practice. We're day 2 now in the IETF. I'm sure you've seen this a few times, but just be aware that what you say is considered to be a contribution. Please look at the links for more information about that. There's a note really well. There's details there that I shouldn't try to interpret, but generally this is a professional meeting. We conduct ourselves professionally. And if there's anything that comes up during the meeting, there's a process for how to deal with that if necessary. Some meeting tips: if you're in person, make sure to sign in with this session with using the data tracker, the QR code. You can point your camera at the QR code hanging on the microphone. It is important to get for blue sheets, also for joining the queue and everything. If you are, join the queue, but when you are step, away from the microphone, please remove yourself from the queue. Same for the remote participants, removing yourself from the queue. And use of a headset is strongly recommended. There's a variety of resources. These are in the agenda. Of course, you can't really click on the links on the screen here, but hopefully you have a copy of the agenda on your local machine. You can refer to those URLs. I do see that Per has posted the URL for the notes to the chat window, and so if folks can help us with collecting the notes, that'd be great. We do encourage participation. IETF is a volunteer organization, depending on your contribution. There are several important actions listed below by level of engagement. So first off, just interacting with others on the mailing list. Try to reach outside of your specialty, like you're focused on a certain draft, but look at the other drafts. It's important to have a cross collaboration, for people looking at everyone else's drafts. You can always be a commentator on the microphone, right? So as we're conducting this meeting, come to the mic if you would like to say something that's considered a contribution. Reviewing drafts, that is, publishing documents is the core function of this group. It requires reviews, draft reviewers. Many of you will note that several of the last calls failed, mostly because of not a sufficient amount of reviews. Unfortunately, it's necessary for us to judge the consensus based on, having a solid number of reviews. So we will continue to reissue the last call request until we feel enough reviews have come in. Of course, implementing a draft, having running code is the ultimate test. We should, as an organization, start with running code and then write the document, right? But certainly having an implementation or two prior to the document going to the ISG for review there would be extremely helpful. It does aid them greatly to know that the document has been implemented. There's always the possibility to be a document shepherd, and as many will know, Rashad just recently stepped down, being secretary for NetConf. He's now chair for INMOP. So we congratulate him, but also we're now in need of a shepherd. I put out a request, a list a couple weeks ago. It's still an open request, so if anyone's interested in being secretary for NetConf, please unicast the chairs. Oh, sorry, I said shepherd, I meant secretary. You know what I meant. But it's also true, we do need document shepherds, and generally, definitely whenever a document has completed last call, we look for the shepherd at that time. It is actually possible for a shepherd to be assigned at the time the document is adopted, and that's something we don't do, but I'm beginning to think it's a good idea because it involves more people in the process earlier. And of course, having someone else really focused on getting a document pushed through the process quickly is necessary. Okay, so I didn't mean to spend too much time on this slide, but I do think it's so important, and we request everyone to try to participate, encourage participation. I'm going to go fast over this slide. I think I'll just skip it all together. About authors and presenters, and okay, so this is the important part, the status of all the documents, and this is in data tracker order, so which doesn't necessarily reflect the publishing process order. It's just how they appeared in data tracker. But you can see we have a number of documents that are in RFC editor queue or ISG evaluation, or they're in consensus, meaning that they're post working group last call and they're waiting for a Shepherd write-up. So this is the first 2 slides. The second slide is the other half. Now we see again there's one document, port numbers, which is waiting for a write-up. It's post working group last call, and the proof canned. That was an example of a draft that did not get sufficient number of reviews, so we're going to have to reissue the working group last call for that one. The rest of them are works in progress. Most are being discussed in this session, so we look forward to those presentations. I think that the one second to last there, Yang notification versioning, the update was posted to the list, and it will not be discussed during the session. The agenda for today is first we'll have 10 minutes NetConf over quick, and then I probably shouldn't spend too much time here, but the Yang groupings for quick clients and quick servers, list pagination for Yang driven protocols, the augmented by addition to the Yang library, and then continued we have the external trace ID for configuration tracing, adaptive subscription for Yang notifications, UDP based transport for configured subscriptions, Yang groupings for UDP clients and servers, subscriptions for distributed notifications, Yang notification transport capabilities, extensible Yang model for Yang push notifications. Wow, this goes on and on. Yang push operational data observability enhancements. And then a couple of exciting ones, HTTPS notif draft implementation. So this is a follow-on to the the presentation of last time's meeting. And then a new one, a CBOR encoding for HTTPS-based transport Yang notifications. So that completes the share slides, and Per will be running slides remotely. And so Per, did you want to bring up the slides for the next one? And David, I think you're in the room.
Yes.
Perhaps I need to stop sharing slides.
You need to stop sharing.
Okay. Oh, how do I stop sharing? Okay, I think I just did. Perfect. Do be mindful of your time allocations. We have a short.
Okay. You should have control in the room.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Now I'd like to give a brief introduction for draft NetConf over quick, and the title is using NetConf over quick connections. Sorry, connections. And I'm Jin Dai from Home, and my English name is David Dai. It is amazing. I have using this English name for more than 20 years. 20 years. Sorry. Then, because this is the version 2, and this is the modification occurring from based on the collected comments since the 1-to-1 meeting Dublin, and I'd like to give some introduction for the modification occurring to the former versions. The last of the okay. And to the modification related to the last version and the version 1 from Dublin. And we have given the introduction during the Dublin meeting. And the first one is about the stream, because the quick streams is an advantage of the quick, and the multiple bidirectional stream support is the critical advantage of the quick. So I'd like to give a detailed introduction for this part. And then Based on the former version, we have supported to use the 2 or more quick bidirectional stream for one NetConf session. And based on the comment from a certain expert, we think in order to keep order of the network session, then we should use only one quick bidirectional stream. And only one bidirectional stream is set up for NetConf sessions. And however, because the quick support the 2 or more bidirectional streams, and we know, and to the NetConf between a peer of client and the server, and we also support 2 or more NetConf sessions here. So I'd like to suggest that we use 2 or more quick bidirections between the peer of client and the server. That's some descriptions related to modification about the quick streams. And another one is about the NOQ YANG module, and some experts supported to insert some information about the NOQ YANG module here. And we can have an subsection NetConf client augmentation here. And we also and NetConf server augmentation and the subsection. And we also complete the IETF NetConf quick module. And the bottom of the slide, we have got some summary information for the IETF NetConf quick module. Frankly to say, we have inserted the whole description of the IETF NetConf quick module in the version 2 of this draft. The second modification, the next modification is about the endpoint authentication. And as to the former version, we have suggested using the third-party authentication. From my side, it is a candidate solution for this part. However, based on the comments from some experts, and then we agree to remove the third-party authentication from the former version of this draft. And the version to the version 2, we have strike out those descriptions. Another one is about the subscription server identity, and we have elaborated the descriptions. And this and to this version, the descriptions about the server identity is very simple, almost too simple. But even we have designed such a part with referring to a TLS over NetConf over TLS. Similarly, about the subscription client identity, we have taken the same action on these descriptions. We have used the descriptions with reference, with citation from NetConf over TLS. The last modification is under any other aspect about the modification occurring to this draft. And first, RFC reference over TLS is updated. And because the new one has obsoleted the old one, we have replaced the old one with the new one. And because we have this draft has the tightly correlation with the draft NetConf client server and NetConf quick client server. So we have added those two relevant documents in this draft. And also because NetConf can over any connection-based transport protocols such as BIP and SOAP. And so far, I think about the BIP and the SOAP, those transport protocols has not been used in the network and applications. So some experts suggested to strike out those citations of BIP and SOAP here. And also we have give the improvement for the whole document about the editorial improvement. Thank you. Then the above are the modifications related to the current version. Now I think we have got several issues to be discussed here. The first one is about the endpoint authentication is enhancing. Now that we have just give some description with the reference to RFC 7589. And about the server authentication, we use the server identity must be verified according to section 6 of RFC 7589. And the client identity must be verified according to section 7 of RFC 7589. And this description seems a little simple. And in the future, if we got any proposal and comment, maybe we can improve this part. However, and to the RFC 7589, and this RFC also designed such a description about the server authentication. And in RFC 7589, they designed the server authentication with the with the relevant to RFC 6215. And another one is about the security conservation, the needs enhancing and confirming. Because some expert brought some proposal about this part. Another one is about the UDP port. From my side, we have just used the current description. It is required for INA to resolve UDP port. And from my side, it has some more advantages here because according to current network operators and the network service providers, in order to guarantee the queries of TCP traffic, maybe some UDP traffic has been restricted and managed. So if we just apply determine and explicit UDP port here, I think it is facilitate the network operator to allocate the higher priority for the NOQ traffic. So I think it is better to allocate the UDP port here. And so far, the INA has sent an email to us asking whether we should send fill the form and send the form to the INA. Then after that meeting, I'd like to discuss with the chairs to when and who will submit such a form to INA. And about the next version, we will improve the description of endpoint authentication, and we also want to improve the description about the security conservations and other. We will perform the editorial improvement for the whole draft. About the next and first, we want to improve the draft based on comments, and we want to make the draft perfect technically. And the comment can be collected here and can be collected offline the meeting based on discussion among the experts and the co-authors. And we also want to set up editing reviewing virtual editing reviewing session discussing how to improve the draft. And we also want to collect more comments through the mailing list. And last, and the author would like to ask for WG article after the publication of the third version. That's all for this draft. Thank you.
Kent Watson as a contributor. There was a slide earlier that I had, and by the way, I didn't get the slide number because they're not listed. There's a good reminder for people to be sure to put slide numbers on your slides. But it said client identity, server identity. I think you, instead of server identity, you meant server authentication. But anyway, just look at that when,
yes,
at least in the client server drafts, the TLS server draft, we refer to how to authenticate the server. So it's the server authentication, but how to identify yourself to the server. So that's client identity.
Yes.
So, okay. And also on this particular draft, as chair, it says polish the draft based on comments. Actually, I don't think there has been many comments. I know there's some activity in GitHub, but working group needs to know that GitHub is not the official location for IETF process. Everything has to be on the list. So be sure that discussions are happening on the list. I think I saw a request for reviews and there was no comments, right, on the list. So pretty quiet on the list, which is not good. So please, if people can review the next version 3 of the draft, that would be great.
Mahesh, and speaking as a contributor, I pretty much want to repeat what Kent just said about discussion on the mailing list. I went back and looked at the 121 minutes because of lack of time pointed you to and said have the discussion on the mailing list. And I went and I checked, there was nothing. There was no discussion of this draft on the mailing list. To the GitHub point, there were issues number 5, 6, 18, and 19 that were opened by Med and I. they were closed with a comment with no notification to the working group as to why and how the resolution happened. So please, before you close an issue on the GitHub, you need to at least bring it to the mailing list and tell the working group why you think you need to close the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Joe? And I think we're closing the queue. Per, can you start sharing the next step?
I'll be quick. So I read the latest version and it feels underspecified. You talk about the bidirectional and unidirectional streams and you throw around like messages like this should be bidirectional RPC requests. Messages like this should be unidirectional, some notification types from the server. Maybe some specific concrete examples mapping like this message type should be set with these bits in Quick would help and make it seem more like a standard draft or document and less like some suggestions. And it's maybe just the way I read it, but it really did feel like those two sections are very short. And I love short and sweet documents, but I think maybe some more concrete text there would help make this thing more implementable.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll wait to move to the next presentation.
No,
Thank you.
not illustration for you to comment.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think maybe just about the peer between peer of a client and the server, and we've got some sessions, and we ought to we got two target. One is keep the order of the packet or the data among the sessions, and the second we want to make full use of the range of the Quick. So then that's the 2 points. Okay.
And here's a great opportunity to take that discussion to the list.
Okay.
All right, next presenter, Per.
That would be me. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to present a quick update for the Quick Client Server draft. Let's go. Or so I thought. Yes. So it's reusable YANG groupings for the Quick protocol, reusing TLS client server and UDP client server for the basis of the standard, adding some transport parameters that you can configure, and it's now used by the NETCONF over Quick draft, which we'll get into. So updates since last meeting, it is now adopted by the working group, added Quick transport parameters not only in GitHub but actually in the document, and moved the augment of NetConf client server with the Quick transport into the NetConf over Quick draft. So the transport parameters that have been added and discussed shortly at adoption time is version, initial RTT, congestion control algorithm, max idle timeout, initial max streams, bidirectional and unidirectional, and keep alive interval. And those were placeholders to garner discussion. So we need more discussion about that. And it's a work in progress. As you can see, some notes on the left-hand side that the version is now a leaf, but maybe should be a leaf list to allow for supporting multiple versions of Quick. Initial RTT is implementation specific from the Quinn, the Rust library. And for congestion control, a YANG modeling thing that it should use identities instead of string type. So all of these are now string type because they're placeholders to just show the intention of what settings, parameters to add. So what options to add or remove? We need to motivate the existence if they're not part of Quick. So for instance, initial RTT, we would have to discuss that. Perhaps there's a reason to add custom settings that are not even YANG modeled, but you can just shove them down the stack. And I think Med suggested to have a IANA YANG model that can be generated maybe for Quick transport and available Quick versions. These are the IANA registries, if I recall correctly. And for NetConf over quick, so in this draft previously augmented NetConf client server. That was not the way to do it. This has now moved into NetConf over quick, where it should live. Next steps: work on issues raised on the by the working group and requesting more feedback from the working group. That was it. I think I will take no questions, but we'll just continue on with the next presenter. And I'll take the discussion to the list.
Okay. All right, and so while Per is transitioning to the next slides, and Chin, I think you're presenting. For those who are wondering, why don't we have a RESTConf over a quick draft or RFC? It's because we don't need to. Already, the RESTConf is on top of HTTP. HTTP supports Quick. No updates needed. It already is published to support Quick. The HTTP client server draft has been updated to specifically state that it's possible to configure, clients and servers to use Quick as well. All right, thank you. You got the clicker. Go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Qingwu, and on behalf of the listed pagination design team member, I will present this quick update of what we are doing for list pagination since last IETF meeting. And actually, quick recap a little bit of history. Actually, since last IETF meeting, actually, Mahesh, helped to kick off this working group last call. We received the comments from Rob Welton, Rob Weil, and also Andy Berman, if I remember correctly. So we actually, design team member get together to discuss, review all these, comments. Actually, we, create all the issue tickets on the GitHub, and we find a solution to resolve all these comments. So here, what we are actually, we are here to report what we have done so far. And so we have 3 drafts actually. First is list pagination base draft. The current version is 0.6, and the main change you can see first we actually remove limit equal 0, because originally we think this limit equal 0 only used for the debug, but based on the design team member discussion, we think for query in the result for query usually is already valid during the development stages. Therefore, this limit equal 0 is not needed. In addition, we actually add, one parameter we call the limiter equal unbounded. This means we will not impose a limit on the result set. Actually, we think this is a useful feature, so we added this summary text to expand this. Second big change is we remove the delete operation, only keep, get operation, pagination get operation applied to the list or leaf list. And so this is a comment from the Robert. Actually, we actually agreed to remove this. I think this is a summary what we have. Actually, I think we already, I should stop here actually. So agreement, actually, we think this kind of delete operation can be, leave to the RESTConf next. So we will, take it out this delete operation from the draft. I think this will be implemented in the next revision, especially for the RESTConf draft. Yeah, that's the current change we made. And we also clarify the text where, and the supply where expression. Currently, we apply this where expression, to be, allowed to be, of arbitrary complexity. So we add some text to clarify this, and another change is, clarify the node in the sort by. Actually, and we think client will be allowed to request the sorting by any data node within the result set. So this is a change we already made actually in the latest version of the draft. And we add a feature sort. Actually, this is really based on the Robert's suggestion. We really need to adopt that like MVP, concept. And so one of the, we propose a change, we introduce this feature, for example, the direction local, and, So the sort this parameter is option parameter. Because they add a dependency to the direction and local parameter, only sorter parameter is available, and we will see direction and local parameter will be available. And yeah, also yeah, based on this MVP principle, we only enable limit cursor and submit it, and we make it by default actually, and that's change we made actually. And so the second draft is pagination NETCONF draft. So I think this we just did a minimal change actually. We align offset parameter error handling with the list pagination based draft. So based on Robert's comments, and I think this make sure everything consistent, not introduce confusion. And another is about the pagination RESTconf draft. We clarify the conformance issue, try to also make it consistent with this pagination based draft. We also fixed the limit evaluated value explanation, and also made a lot of editorial change. I think that's all we have already done. And for the next step, we think we believe actually we address all the issue, and we want to mention for sublimit we still keep it, although we think these comments raised by the Andy Berman, but we think this is something, it's a very useful feature. We already implement this, and I think Per actually already implement this in the JSON RPC interface actually. So this is something we think we should keep at it as it is. So request was for the working group. I hope Mahesh can help again. We can kick off the second working group last call to see whether we have additional comments or to make sure all the comments all the issue has been resolved. Yeah, Mahesh.
All right. Speaking as the person who's going to lead the working group last call, do we actually need a second working group last call? Because I thought the idea was that the working group last comments were provided.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
maybe that's a request wrong. Yeah. So AD, maybe you should decide whether you should kick off the second or we close the existing working group last call. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Right. And the second question was maybe directed more to Per, was you mentioned something about having addressed all the comments you received from Rob Wilton and Rob Willis. Is that true?
Yes, we have addressed all the comments from all the reviewers. Maybe not exactly to their content, but they're addressed in some way or another, and some are mutually exclusive as well. Especially this with a sort feature or a minimal profile of supported parameters and so on.
Okay. I forgot to mention Andy's. I believe there was a comment by Andy. The last I read, I guess there was still discussion going on. Has that been resolved?
Kent, as the author, I believe the response to Andy was that we explained how sublist limit was working, how it's different than depth, and that there was no intention to make change. We did not hear back as to if that's okay with him or not, but at the moment we don't believe it's currently a blocker.
Okay. So I did officially close the working group last call. So now it's, I guess, revised ID needed to, or have all the comments been incorporated?
We also believe we resolve all the issue. We are confident that this should be moved forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
One point. We have implementation of sublist limit, and that addresses Andy's last comment. We need to remove the delete things or revised revision for the RESTconf draft needs to be done. Other than that, it's yeah, done.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And it looks like we get a little more time back as well. So let's see. The next presenter is how do you pronounce his name? So Zhao Yu Lin? Oh, there. Okay, she's remote.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Do I have the slide control? Okay. So I will just start, and I will introduce the augmented SPY addition into the IETF Young library update. I believe this is not the 01 version of the slides. Could you please swap to the 01 version?
Sorry, I'll fix it.
Okay, yeah. So we have worked on 2 version updates during this period. For the first update, we are the most important changes is that we have addressed the scope of augmented SPY to be only considering the direct augmentation, and we have also worked on the editorial changes such as updating the introduction and draft refinement, and some reference updates. For the second version, which we submitted yesterday, we were merging Thomas' review feedbacks, mainly editorial changes, and deletes unused references. For the direct the scope of augmented SPY, we have added section 4.2 implementation instruction to explain this, and we have also added a section 4.2.2 a YAM module set example for explaining this purpose, which I will introduce in the later changes explanations. And this is the module sets we are in we have put in section 4.2.2. There will be 5 modules in total, and module A that firstly define a container called full, and then module B that's augmenting the container full with a container called full-b, and module C augments to the container full-b to add a leaf called leaf-c. At the same time, it has defined a container called full-c itself, which is augmented by module E and module F, which both adds a container and a leaf in it. And the YAM tree is following, as we can see in the container in the YAM tree of module 8 in the container full. There are contents that's defined in the augmentations from module B and module C. When discussing about this issue, we have 3 potential solutions discussed. The first one is to use the direct augments, and the and which we believe is more clear and simple. That is, the results will be module A is not augmented by module B, and B is by C. C is augmented by E and F. And the second solution is to produce the recursive search results. And in this case, it will be the augmentations for each of the augmented SPY provided, search for the augmented SPY of that specific module, and also put that into the augmented SPY results. And therefore, in the augmented SPY results, there will be loads of module for module A, for instance, in this case. And we believe this recursive search should be done by the client instead of the device. And the third solution we talk about is to perform search based on the augment statement XPath for module 8 when passing the module B and is specifically passing the augment statement XPath. It found module 8 and therefore module 8 is augmented by module B. And when passing module C, on the XPath, there are module A and module B, and therefore C is put it as the augmented by result for module A and module B. But then we, in the discussion, we recognize that this is not an augmentation. Specifically, when module C appears in module A's augmented by list, it's not an augmentation, but rather an indirect dependency. So we have abandoned this one and chose the direct augment in the end. Going back to the use case of finding the dependency of a specific YAML module, in this we have provided a YAML push message example here when the A module is subscribed and here is a notification message. We can see that the content defined in module B and module C has appeared here. However, when we, since now that we have defined the scope of augmented by to only consider the direct augmentations, in order to find the module C here, we need the client needs to perform recursive search, which means to search for when module B appears and the augmented by result of 8, B's augmented by results should also be searched, and then we can find the module C. And that's for the direct augments. And one open issue we have is to add the augmented bytes to the deprecated module states container. The background is that the module state is still used by the device no matter whether they're loading RFC 7895 or RFC 8525, although it's deprecated. But adding augmented by here will be solving the above situation. And the question from author is that whether when adding this augmented by into the module states container, whether we can use the same grouping definition as used in the YAML library, or we should follow the format of the deviation in the module states. The difference is that if we follow the definition that we were using in YAML library, there will be the module name as the leaf ref. However, if we follow the deviation definition, the key is format as the name and revision. And therefore, the revision here will not be used if we use this unified grouping for these two augmentation statements. The author consider the following the deviation definition would be a better idea, so as to reduce the complexity for implementation, but it's a question to the work group. And that's the only open issue we have in the list. After resolving that, we believe the draft is complete and we have addressed all issues. Questions? Any questions?
So Rob Wilton, so just to answer your question about whether you need the revision date, I think you don't, because I think the augmentations only matter for implemented modules, and you can only implement it given a single version of a module. So I don't think you need the revision date. So I think you can lose it and keep it simple.
Thank you.
Kent is chair. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, sorry. I thought there was something else. Never mind. All right, I don't see anyone else in queue. Thank you very much. Next presentation is from Jean, is remote, external trace ID for configuration tracing.
Hello.
We hear you.
Very good. Hello. So this is the update about the external transaction ID for configuration tracing. So actually not a lot of changes since the last time. What we did is that we added the security consideration and the IANA consideration. And basically that's it. So actually it's going to be a very quick presentation. So we don't have any open question left, and it seems that the draft is ready for the last call.
Mahesh speaking as a contributor. If you could go back to your security considerations, so the template I think you're following is slightly old. You might want to look at RFC 8407 biz and see an update. I think it's the first paragraph in your case that probably doesn't match that template.
Okay, yeah, I will update, yeah.
Okay, well, so Kent as chair, I'm astounded by how much time remaining we have for this presentation. Jean, it would have been great if you could have told the chairs that you didn't need this much time, so that we could have allocated the session time better. In
Yeah,
general.
sorry.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next presentation is by Shafan, Adaptive Subscription for Yang Notifications.
Hi, can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, good. So hello everyone. This presentation is about the adaptive subscription to Yang notification. This work has not been presented for quite a while. To refresh some memory, this work was adopted in June 2022 with the intended status as experimental, because the authors think this is an interesting idea, while the working group thought, given the server's implementation complexities here, we may need to further decide whether its suitability for broad adoption or standardization. And we do have some implementations, and we had the hackathon project to show some demos of this work and the related implementation status, and some operational experience are included in the draft as well. And since adoption, the draft has reviewed by Michael, Adrian, and Thomas, we believe, and thanks a lot for their valuable comments. We look forward to more comments and suggestions from the working group. Currently, we think the draft is stable now, and there is no pending issues so far. So to give some recent updates, we augmented the notification capabilities module to allow the discovery of adaptive subscription capabilities, which is more about the per node capability. And we also add an implementation status session and refine the use cases. And recently we followed the security consideration template defined in RFC 8407B draft. And there are some other editorial cleanups as suggested by reviewers. So for next steps, the authors would like to request working group last call. This draft has been worked for a while. We think it's ready now, and we always welcome any comments and suggestions from the working group. Thank you. That's it.
Any comments? Okay, so as chair, I think I agree that we can move this to working group last call, and I look forward to everyone's comments for that last call. Thank you, Shafan.
Thank you.
One quick question, if you don't mind. This is Benoit speaking. So I was checking the security consideration for this draft and the previous one. So Mahesh, even if this is still a draft, the 8407 bis, you recommend that we use that template already, right?
That is correct. That's what I've been recommending, because I think there is a typo in the original template with respect to.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, our next presentation is Alex, and this is the UDP-based transport for configured subscriptions. And Alex is in the room, so give the clicker the control.
Hello to everyone. I am Alex, presenting an update on the UDP notif draft on behalf of all my co-authors. So just to give a status on this draft, we have had a working group last call, which ended on February 13th, which has already successfully closed. I would like to explicitly thank all the contributors that have reviewed this draft and have sent a very detailed review on the mailing list. I do believe that this has really improved the draft, but also more importantly, they have triggered very lively discussions, which at the end really improved the document. So we have had some normative changes on this draft. The core ideas of this draft, they obviously have not changed. But first, for example, we have had the private encoding option, which has been removed. The feedback from the group was that it was underspecified and actually the audience was not getting the main idea. So at the end, discussing with also offline with Benoit and Met, we decided to just remove this private option. We received a comment that mandating the order of the options, there was no reason to do that. The main reason of doing that was to put the segmentation option first, because some hardware implementations were more easy to implement it that way, and also it was an easy implementation on the collector. And so we have removed this mandate statement. However, something that it remains is that the segmentation option must be the first option on the UDP notif. We have relaxed the mandating DTLS encryptions. I would like to thank Rob for discussing this with the SEC ADs. So far, what the feedback was that DTLS 1.2 and later must be supported, and DTLS 1.3 should be supported. So we have removed all the DTLS 1.2 limitations from the document and also from the YANG module. And then at the end, 7 is mandatory for large messages on UDP notif. We have had also some other editorial changes, feedback from Benoit that we did not state it, and that we have adherence to NMDA architecture. We have a new section about the terminology used from YANG push, but also distributed notif draft. There is text explaining how a message from a collector side should be reassembled using the publisher ID and the message ID. A new section discussing how DTLS fragmentation should work with the UDP notif segments. Feedback from Met, rather than specifying which DTLS cyber suites, just reference VCPs. Updated some references, and then security considerations updated with the last template from NetMod. And then also we have added a statement on why we are allocating an IANA code point for a draft that has been expired. And the reason for that is because there are deployments with this legacy UDP notif protocol, and that's why we have this IANA allocation. So so far this draft we have had plenty of discussions. It is ready for the IESG reviews. I believe we are looking for a shaver, but I will leave this decision to the working group chairs.
Yes, as chair, there is a volunteer for Shepherd. Per and I need to discuss, and hopefully we'll have a Shepherd shortly. I do have a question, I guess as a contributor. So this mechanism is really useful and good for notifications that are, it's okay to be lossy.
Yes.
You know, because the follow-up would, you're going to get a follow-up sooner or later. You know, if it's necessary for the notification to be delivered, then the guidance is to use the HPS notif draft.
Yes.
And of course, I think the expectation is the client, the subscriber will know these are the XPaths that I need to use for when it's lossy, and these are the XPaths I need to use when it shouldn't be lossy. So it puts the onus onto the subscriber to be able to look at the data model and know what data is okay to be lossy and not lossy. Okay, so finally I'm getting to the question or the comment, which is how do they come to know this? Like, is there should the working group discuss the creation of some annotation or metadata that can tag information in the data models so that subscribers can be aware of what data is okay to be lossy and not lossy, and you know, so somehow guide the subscribers to know to make the right kinds of subscriptions.
So on my side, I would say this is a bit out of the scope of at least UDP Notif. On how to do that, yes, I agree with you that right now is up to the, let's say, a vendor or operator who deploys it to analyze whether this information can be lossy or cannot. But yeah, I don't have an answer for it.
And I agree, it's not specific to this draft, but I'm just kind of leveling up being cognizant of a looming issue. Rob?
So I suspect Thomas can give a better answer than this. I suspect for me, it feels like this is probably an additional complexity that's not necessary. I think that with configured subscriptions, the people who are setting up the subscriptions will know what they want to do with the data and how they're processing it, and hence they'll know whether or not they can handle loss of that data or not, and then they just have a choice in terms of whether they use a reliable transport or not. So I'm not sure that that's needed.
Okay. Tomas is next in queue.
Yeah, Thomas. We have an applicability section where we are describing where it is applicable to, and we are writing accounting. And accounting refers in Yang Push to periodical subscriptions.
Okay, perfect. And now Mahesh.
And speaking as a contributor, I think practically I agree that not that we necessarily need annotation, but one of the practicalities that we have done with our models is if it's counter container, then we know that this is going to be sent at a fair amount of interval, at a regular interval. Whereas state information, which is on demand, on change, that has to go over a reliable. So some of this problem can truly be resolved by you modeling it correctly, modeling your how you model the data correctly is what I mean.
Okay, so as a contributor, adding to that, it sounds then like a convention. Maybe we could have a best practice of some sort, like to recommend using a container called counters, for instance, if that's the intended use. So perhaps we could look forward to a draft of some sort that identifies some of these best practices. Okay, all right. So thank you very much. We are doing very well on time. Is there anything else?
No, next.
Oh, next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. So next presentation is the Yang groupings for UDP clients and UDP servers.
So me again, I am presenting an update on the UDP client server draft. So yeah, we all know that it's implementing a grouping for the client and for the server for UDP to be used standalone with other protocols. we have had a working group last call, which ended also on the 20th of February, which closed already a few days ago. I here again thank notably Thomas, Benoit, Andy, Maish, and Rob for the review and for the comments. In this case, the model hasn't been changed. However, we have had some editorial changes. Some adding consistency with the TCP groupings draft in terms of structure. We are having a explicit text that the remote address and the local address on the server grouping must be part of the same address family. New section about adherence to an MDA architecture, and again, the security considerations with the latest version of the template. So at the beginning, this draft was ready for next steps, but I just got a last minute discussion with Rob during the hackathon, which we felt that it might be worth discussing this with the working group. So the issue is regarding the UDP server, which with the current implementation, the server cannot have a local address bound to multiple local ports. And the reason is because the local address is the only leaf present in the local bind key on the list. Adding the local port into the key is not actually an option, because this would make the local port mandatory, and this has been already discussed on a long thread a long time ago. We also wanted to note that this was already discussed on the TCP server grouping. Yeah, here again with question to working whether this is a valid use case which we need to solve, or we just need to use the current iteration. A way to fix this is changing the local port into a leaf list instead of a leaf. So I would say the two options that we have now is option A, which is just leaving the model as it is now, and then option B is changing the port to a leaf list. So far, I have discussed offline with Rob, Matt, and Kent, and the feeling I had is that we should just decide and just move on with the draft. So yeah, feedback on this, maybe a poll if we don't have a decision, but yeah, a decision on how to, which the option.
Okay, so maybe we can discuss this for a moment, and then we can do a show of hands. I think I may have been the last person to put a comment to the list on this, and the question I asked was, in what scenario is it that a server would want to have more than one port open, like different port numbers on the same IP address? Well, normally I'm thinking of an application, a server has a well-known port, and it only needs to listen to that one port. If it's TCP, of course, it can accept any number of TCP connections on that port, and then they would be assigned sockets. If it's UDP, then of course it can be multiplexed. But I don't know. I just don't have a lot of. It's not familiar to me that a server would need to have more than one local port open. So does anyone have any comment or how necessary it is to support multiple ports in the same IP address?
Joe Clark, from an appliance perspective, it probably isn't, but you can imagine wanting to run multiple instances of, let's say, a web server on a single device, and you would want to start that up on different ports, maybe, or definitely. In this case, though, with like, I'm going to be if you're talking about like something that's embedded, like I said, probably not like an appliance. But if you're saying like, I want to have multiple instances of trying to think of a UDP service off maybe Radius. I want to have multiple Radius servers running that serve different purposes. I might want to have a Radius server that's bound to 1812 and a Radius server that's bound to 1645. And I still want to be able to configure that.
Okay, just quick follow-up. When you're binding those two different ports, are you expecting different kinds of higher level layer processing? So for instance, on one port, it's TCP clear text. On the other port, it's TLS.
I might. Yeah, I maybe Radius might be a bad example there, but I might have one type of service where I want TLS and one type of service where I want clear text, one for maybe production, one for debugging or development.
Right. Well, and the reason I ask is because this grouping would be instantialized per endpoint. So if there's one endpoint that's supposed to have encryption on, certificates are being configured. Like if you look at the UDP client server suite of drafts, that would be a particular endpoint, and then a whole nother endpoint would be for if you want it over clear text. So those are two different endpoints, and each of those endpoints could have the same IP address, right?
Correct.
Because they're different endpoints. But here, this is when it's the same endpoint, the same endpoint. So like either both ports are being encrypted or both ports are not encrypted. When would that be?
But I'm reading this and I see it. The list is bound or indexed by local address. So if I was saying like local address, I might want. Well, I see what you're saying now.
Per
but it's per endpoint. Yeah.
So if you have a totally different endpoint because it has different, security requirements, or maybe, and here I'm thinking about like, for instance, TLS is on top of UDP, right? But then on top of that, there might be NETCONF, and you might have one NETCONF stack that wants a keep alive timeout to be one thing, and a different stack that's doing, two different stacks. These are different endpoints. Each endpoint gets to have their own local IP address definitions.
Correct. Yes. In that case, yeah, you would want to have different. Yes.
Yeah. That's okay. Next, Rob.
So I think there's probably hypothetical cases where you might want a server running on two ones, like a migration or something. So I think that's certainly, in my mind, it's possible. I was going to make a comment of saying maybe it's worth checking what Linux does here and whether it allows it or not, because that might give it a sort of indication as to whether this matters. Even having said that, I think there's a desire. I know I raised this issue of saying we could just make this the same as TCP, and if it has to be fixed in the future, well, somebody just doesn't use this grouping, which isn't the end of the world. So it's an easy fix, and if it comes along, we come and fix it then. So I wouldn't necessarily rat hole on whether or not we got cases for it. I don't think this matters that much.
Thank you.
So Benoit, the question we have to ask ourselves is, whenever we do grouping, do we have to think about every single potential use case of the future, or are we doing grouping for the majority of what we want to implement now? And I think this is somehow the latter. So if someone has got an exceptional case in the future, maybe they just don't use the grouping, and that's okay.
Okay, great. Okay, and so I'm going to start the show of hand poll now. Let's see. Should we leave the model as is, having a single port per IP address in the grouping?
So yes, it's option A.
This will be option A, and of course, if you say no, then that'd be the option C,
changing
the other one. To make it a leaf list for the ports. Okay, I think that's probably gone on long enough. It looks like the majority thinks we should leave it as is, and even though there are some who feel it should be different, but almost 4 times more people, or 3 times more, believe that we should leave it as is. So let's do that.
Okay.
And also, I believe that means it's ready, right? The current version is ready to be progressed.
Exactly.
Perfect. So we also will be needing a shepherd for this to do the write-up.
Can I quickly ask, is it, so 4 people have said no. I said no opinion. It might be worth asking why and seeing if we can get the reasons for that. I don't know if, have people got cases here that they know this can be an issue, in which case maybe it's the wrong choice.
Yeah, I thought about that as well. I mean, normally when there's a disagreement, we ask for why. And in this case, it's no sounds negative, but it actually isn't negative. It's just that it's a positive that they prefer the other approach. And I don't know. If anyone would like to, who voted no, that you prefer, if you are willing to share why you think it's important, we could do that. Anyone? Okay, so as I said, we'll leave it as is and progress it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Yeah.
And next we have subscription to distributed notifications. 5 minutes.
So that will be a quick one. So the last call ended on February 21st. We got a couple of reviews. Thanks a lot. And there were only some minor editorial changes, and the document is ready for ISG. And what I understood is also we have a shepherd already. That's all.
Wow. Okay, we're just blazing through these slides. All right. Are there any comments on this draft? Okay, so we'll progress as soon as we can. Looking for a shepherd. Recall at the beginning, an excellent way to volunteer IETF is to be a shepherd. We chairs very much appreciate when we have shepherds. Okay. So Tomas is presenting again, Yang notification transport capabilities.
Perfect. So just as a little reminder what it is about, it's about a NetConf or RESTconf client can discover from a Yang push publisher what are the transport capabilities. Those capabilities include the transport protocol like UDP notif or HTTPS notif, the security protocols, DTLS version 1.2, 1.3, TLS 1.2, 1.3, and also the different encoding formats like JSON, CBOR, or XML. So the document is now working group adopted. Thanks a lot for the review and also the support on the mailing list. We received a review from Met and addressed is in version 01. There were some minor editorial changes and notably same as for DTLS, we have now 2 identities for version 1.2 and 1.3. So now we are matching, we are in line with what's being defined in RFC 9645. Next step is to validate implementations, and I will show briefly one from last weekend's hackathon. And if there is nothing bad showing up, I think we are ready for working group last call already. So this is just an example implementation from a Cisco iOS XR device. The RPC reply basically shows the envelope part, what is being supported, and relevant now to this document is the yellow part, which encoding and also transport protocols are being supported. In this case, UDP notif and JSON. And that would be it.
Per is in queue.
Perfect. Per.
Yes, hi. I read the document and saw that in the Yang model, you say that TLS 1.2 is obsolete in the identity. I have not found any support for this. So it might be a nit, but TLS 1.2 is very much supported still, and there's no plan that I've seen for obsoleting or deprecating it yet.
You're absolutely right. It's a nit. I will correct. Perfect.
Yeah. And then one more in this example that you have. I wonder with the prefixes where you use IDX here for the XML namespace, is that just out of convenience or why? Because you have different namespaces. You have a UDP notif transport and then subscribe notifications. I would guess you would use the subscribe notifications prefix, which is SN, and maybe what is for UDP notif transport instead of IDX to make it more clear.
I was just copy pasting from the hackathon results. I need to look at it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
So not Per, can you send me an email and I'll with the details and I'll check it. Because I think this is a question on our implementation, isn't it, rather than the model?
Yeah.
Yep.
So Kent, as chair, at the very end, you said that you think it's ready for progression already, which the working group may recall, this just got adopted. So we're moving very quickly from adoption to last call. This is possible because this document has been implemented by a number of vendors and service providers. Running code, is the ultimate litmus test and allows for the acceleration of progression of documents through the IETF. Highly recommended for all authors to try to have their work implemented in order to accelerate the progression through the IETF process. Thank you.
Thanks.
And next, Alex is back. He's presenting extensible Yang model for Yang push notifications.
So Alex, again, presenting an update on the notif envelope drafts on behalf of the authors, of course. Just a reminder back, what we are implementing is a new structure for Yang push that can be used on both configured and dynamic subscriptions, and that it's extensible with metadata. I have presented this a bunch of times, so it's to be enabled globally on the router, on the publisher. It's discoverable, so the client can discover which metadata can get from this header. Extensible. We are fixing also some under specification on JSON and CBOR. And we are defining also already the first extensions to this notif envelope. So this draft, we have had a joint interim meeting between NMOP and NETCONF on February 10th, which we have had a lot of participants joining the discussions and discussing whether the proposals at the time were the right ones. And the conclusion from that interim, it was that we should simplify the solution. Otherwise, it's a struggle for the operator to operate this solution, but also a lot of corner cases for the vendors. I will explain later which choices we did, but we also confirmed that there is interest on having the observation timestamp as an extension to this header. We have had a working group adoption call ended in March 7th, which now it's successfully adopted. So changes since the first version. So the idea here was to enable this envelope globally on the publisher. Second, we have added the observation timestamp extension. And then third, some minor changes. So first discussion was how to manage globally the enabling this envelope at the end. So the first proposal was centralizing all the requests on an RPC so that we have only one entry point to manage whether this is enabled or not. However, from an operations perspective, this was hard, and we had a lot of corner cases that popped up during the interim meeting. And so we were requested to simplify it. Rather than managing all the corner cases, just make a switch on the subscriptions model. So rather than having a read-only node, now we have a read-write node, enable notification envelope. And when this is switched on and switched down, all the subscriptions are torn down and they are configured with the new envelope defined by this node. The second change was adding the observation timestamp. This is the timestamp that represents at which time the data was pulled from the young push process, or the moment of the on-change exported event. This is some extensions to the YAM push header, so they impact only the push update and push change update, and that's why they are extended to the, let's say, the YAM push envelopes. And they use the same mechanisms to discover whether this is implemented or not, this is supported or not. And now this draft replaces the YAM push observation time draft. And then other minor changes, we have changed the XML that now it follows the YANG, let's say, guidelines rather than XML. The notifications contents have been shortened to contents. We have also some explicit text saying that we should receive first the headers and then the contents. Security considerations updated. Thanks, Matt, to note that the updates on the different RFCs, they don't apply anymore. We have aligned also the examples on the observation timestamp because we noted that sometimes they were hard to parse. So all the examples now are, let's say, monitoring hypothetical IETF interfaces as an XPath. And then some editorial changes explaining, let's say, better how this should be implemented. So what's next? So far, all the issues and requests has been addressed. We are starting to get ready for working rule as call. So yeah, I would like feedback from the group whether the current text is already good or not. Comments on and feedback.
Okay, so we have two in queues. Brad first. Brad, do you have a question? Okay, how about Rob?
Sorry, not.
Oh, okay, Brad's back. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, now he's gone. Rob, it's you.
So on slide 8, I think, or back one, you had a should. The content element should be located at the end. I would make that a must. I think otherwise it requires, if you have it as a should, it requires that clients have to cope with the header coming at the end of the message, because the server might have a valid reason to do it the other way around. So I would make that stronger.
I'm okay with changing that to must.
Yeah, Thomas, just to comment, like the hackathon in last weekend, we have now 2 implementations on the envelope. So, and we're looking forward for the third one.
And I think they are added to the draft also, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we are presenting at NetMob.
Okay, good. So this will be another draft that will be able to move quickly through the process because it's being facilitated by implementation. Okay, very good. Thank you. And next we have Rob Wilton presenting Yang Push operational data observability enhancements. 15 minutes.
I think I need a shorter name. So Yang Push Lite. This effectively, I'm presenting this. I've written quite a lot of this draft of things, but we've had other authors and collaborators that have been involved in this draft as well on the more recent versions. So next slide, please. Or there's a clicker. So what is Yang Push Lite? I've presented this once before in the last IETF meeting. I've talked about it in an interim meeting we had, but I think it's good just to set everyone on the same page because this is new, unadopted work at this moment. And our goal is effectively to try and simplify Yang Push. So as Thomas has attested to, lots of people are implementing Yang Push and subscribe notifications RFCs, but all of us that are implementing it are not quite conforming to the RFCs in various ways, or there's lots of functionality that we're choosing not to implement because it's too complex. And so where we would like to get to as an implementation is to actually get an RFC that accurately defines what we are implementing and everyone else can implement and make sure that everyone gets the same sort of conformance and compliance. And so that's what Yang Push Lite's meant to be. At the same time, the discussions we were having with the operators, we've been having this phase of discussing what are minimum viable products. So let's try and get phases of functionality where both the operators and the vendors all agree as to what we need to implement. And we then implement that same functionality, and then we can move on in stages. So effectively, we've had these MVP releases. We've just sort of finished the first one. And we still need to discuss what's coming the second one. And this is Yang Push Lite might come along in the third one or the second one that we're thinking of, depending on the timing line. And what we're not doing, so this isn't a brand new version of Yang Push, it's a variation of what we have today. We're trying to simplify bits of it, but we also want to change bits, add some enhancements and things like that as well. So there is a certain amount of churn that's going to happen here, but we're not starting from scratch. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're not opening everything to say, okay, let's just sort of reinvent a new telemetry protocol. We're trying to refine what's there. And why are we doing it? I think I already mentioned this effectively, is that we're only implementing a subset of what's there today that's defined in 8639 and 8641. So that's one of the reasons. And the other one is that Thomas and Alex and other people have been bringing lots of extensions to Yang Push to try and align them more in terms of where we want to go. And this is an opportunity to fold some of that into a base draft so that everyone knows what they are. And in some cases, we can simplify the data models a bit as well by having the opportunity. So that's what's sort of driving this writing into new documents and in terms of the way we're doing it. And what about GNMI? So lots of people implement GNMI as a way of exporting telemetry data from devices. One of the things that is nice about GNMI is it has quite a light, easy to read specification. So lots of people can implement it. A downside of that is that you get less consistency with the implementation. So we're trying to get a specification here that's it's longer and a bit tighter, but hence you get more conformance and more regularity between different implementations. So this is just a high-level overview of what we're looking at in terms of what we're changing. So we're trying to remove some complex parts. We want to take out dampening, event frequency negotiation. We've simplified the QoS that had this sort of dependency between different queues, but keeping the DSCP bits that we want. We're trying to align the periodic and on-change encoding so that you can have subscriptions that have both periodic updates and also on-change updates in the same sort of flow and processed in the same way. We want to be able to split up the subscriptions that applies to make it more efficient for devices. So Yang Push, if you had a periodic subscription to the root of the tree, that will require you to return all of the operational data in a single message. And that's sort of hard in terms of us doing that. If you had to buffer that, then that requires potentially a huge amount of memory. And the timestamps that you have associated with that data will obviously go out of sync relative to when the data was read from the device. So we want to try and make Yang Push Lite a bit easier for implementations to implement efficiently. We want to have a simplified filtering semantics, and I want to introduce this new thing called YPath, which is like a bit like XPath, but a bit more JSON-like and a bit more simplified and a bit more aligned towards Yang rather than XML. We also want to look at what's in GNMI and take the best bits out of GNMI and fold them into Yang Push if they make sense to do that. So, we want to do that. We're not just trying to rewrite an IETF version of GNMI though. We still need to keep it fairly close to what Yang Push is. There's some discussion about simplifying the NACAM conformance. Balazs, you want to come and ask your question now? I'll take questions as I go. I'll finish this slide. So to simplify the NACAM conformance, because again, what's in Yang push, it has some quite tight constraints as to when you perform these NACAM checks. And some people implementations are concerned that if you have to go and do a check for every single leaf or data node before you send it, that's going to be too much network traffic and too much overhead. So we want to simplify that. And then the last thing is we want to try and agree a common encoding. So all agree that we'll implement, at least everyone will do JSON effectively, and we'll agree sort of basic easy filtering, that sort of thing as well. So Balazs.
Balazs Daniel Eriksson, also from 3GPP. We defined in 3GPP a so-called JSON expression, kind of an XPath-like expression on JSON data. You might be interested.
Yes, I'd be interested in looking at what you have there. And I've mentioned YPath in this presentation. It is possible I'll try and split it out of this draft and have a separate draft that's simply on YPath to describe that. But I do think also for the YPath, there's two different use cases. For us in Yang push and also Yang packages, we want basically a really simple path expression where you might bind the keys to a specific value or might bind the keys with a regex. But there's also a broader idea of YPath being more like a full version of XPath, but JSONified and Yangified, which might have more complex expressions. So there's two different variants of it. For what we want here, we want a simple version. But I don't want this work to get stuck on a long discussion on YPath because we don't need the more complex stuff. So, but yes, thank you for the suggestion.
Sorry, I'm also in queue. You don't see me yet.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's okay. You said simplified NSAM conformance, and I thought I heard you say so that it's not in the path, the fast path of trying to get the packets out. But that actually doesn't seem right to me. The NACM would be evaluated like at the time the subscription is being configured through the northbound interface, and once it's been accepted by access control, then when it goes out the eastbound interface, there should be no extra checking happening at that time.
That's where we want to get to, but I think with Yang push, I'm not sure that's what it says today.
Okay.
So I think Yang push today, I think there's an obligation that you must not send any data out that doesn't conform. So if, for example, the user policies change on the fly, then you're obliged to restrict the data. And so that's the thing for like dynamic subscription. That's the point that we want to simplify it. So if the users were to change, you might poll them infrequently, you might update the subscriptions, but exactly as you say, we want you to do much more the checks at the subscription creation time and then assume that it's going to be okay. And when it comes to configured subscriptions, mostly, I think, Thomas can correct me, my understanding is they don't really need any of this at all because you already has the access control of that configuration and you trust whoever's configuring it, who's allowed to configure the subscriptions to make sure they only have access to the right data. So it's sort of overkill for configured subscriptions. Dynamic subscriptions are a bit different where if you're going to allow dynamic subscription coming in, you may want to be able to restrict the data they access to. But yes, so we're trying to do some common sense stuff here. I think in some cases, Yang push was over specified and a bit too strict.
Right, and we don't want anything to go in the way of the fast path.
Correct.
Okay.
So in the last,
I'm sorry, there's another person in the queue. Are you in the queue?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yes, it's me. So how would you handle live subscriptions or running subscriptions if they change the NACAM rules? Would you just shut them down?
To be TBD, so don't know yet. So obviously that's one choice is that you do nothing to them and you force the client or the user to make that choice and shut them down. And the second choice is that you, as you say, is you notice the change and you tear them down. And it may be
sort of.
Gone. And that we haven't sort of discussed or debated that point yet, so we don't know which way that's going to go or what we suggest.
Yeah, I would suggest to not have this sad gap of allowing more when you start it and then I didn't want this and then you need to remove the subscription, I would guess, so that you don't have a hole where you leak data.
It depends. I think that's valid, but we also got to look at this pragmatically. I think there's many other cases where if you're removing users' access, you need to take more proactive control of the device and more actively remove them. So I don't know whether we want to over-engineer this if this is a case that you already have to handle elsewhere.
Okay. And Chair, I killed the timer because we have plenty of time to go ahead and field the questions and
Fine.
yes.
And then just tell me when I need to stop.
No, we're
I've
fine.
got enough time.
You've got 10 minutes.
So how in the last IETF meeting, IETF 121, I raised this slide of how we should do these choices. Should we try and do some extensions to the existing drafts? Should we try and do it in the RFC? Should we do a small RFC that updates the functionality? And the read of that meeting was very much we should copy the new parts into a new RFC, and that's the way forward. A new complete document that has everything defined in it. And so that's what I did. I started just before Christmas. That's where the GitHub draft is, and there's now a copy of it posted into the data tracker as well. So I started a new Yang push light draft, and I started by copying literally verbatim the text from 39 and 41 into that document. And then I started to, not all of it, there's a few bits I didn't need at the time. And I started moving that text around and trying to realign it into better sections. And then I went through and I started to sort of simplify the text because of the way the document had been split before, there's sort of a certain amount of repetition and duplication that wasn't needed. So it's had a lot of churn and change from what was there. And I've taken the text and rewritten sections, but haven't got all the way through that. So there's some sections are better than others. You get further down the document, there's still more work to do to structurally complete this draft. In addition to that, we have started having reviews and meetings with the other authors, and I've got so another 3 vendors are signed up for this draft and 2 operators that are backing this. So it's got good industry support, people that want to work on this solution. So we started having those meetings, but only towards the end, once the text was ready. And the expectation is we'll have continuous meetings going forward every couple of weeks, resolve the big issues and progress it. And try and sort of nail the main direction where we go to. So one of the key things that's come out of Yang Push Lite is that we'll do it with a new namespace for the configuration, notifications, and RPCs. And that's for 2 reasons. One, it allows us more flexibility to make the data model a bit cleaner and better in places. And then the other reason is so it allows implementations to support both Yang Push and Yang Push Lite together as a migration strategy. But I would suggest that if this progresses and gets more adoption than Yang Push does, then at some phase after this, we should be looking at maybe marking Yang Push as historic. But I don't think we need to tie it to this work. So plan, I've sort of covered this a bit. Over the next few months, my plan is to have like bi-monthly meetings with the authors, with the other authors, to sort of try and resolve these key points and things and make progress. I'm doing some of that this week with various people as well. And I want to try and get the data model sort of nailed down and the big issues if we can. And then I can update more of the text. I will proactively be spending a reasonable amount of time with this over the next 4 months to try and push this fairly quickly. I've chatted to Kent and things, and we discussed the idea of having a virtual interim to discuss Yang Push. We've got more time. I think that would be really useful where I could present on what's changing and the overview of what the protocol is as well, with a hope that we sort of look towards adoption call around IETF 123 if everything goes well.
Yeah, please send the request to the chairs when you're ready to have an interim.
Okay, thank you. And then so these slides, there's lots of details later in these slides. I won't have time to present them today. They're also explaining what things have changed in the document and what the open issues are. I also have, I think somewhere in the slide, maybe it's the next slide. If you want to review the document, it tells you which parts of the document to look at now, like the list of issues and what's changed. Joe, do you want to take your question now? I'll carry on, fine. So the top issues that we're looking at, this Y path replacement of X path, that's one of these things. I think there's a question as to whether we take X path out, it becomes optional. I don't know yet. There's some questions on what that Y path capabilities are. Does it allow you to, it's definitely we want to allow matching of keys or a wildcard for keys. Do we support regexes and what the syntax of that is? I'd like a light syntax if we do it. And then also related to that is the filtering aspects we want to do. So I've been discussing quite a lot with Thomas this week about the ability to filter that. And do you try and make that part of the Y path expression, more like an XPath language, or do you take that filter outside that allows you to make a simpler filter? And that's the direction I think we want to go in, to try and keep these things simple to configure and set up, which is close to to looking as to what the actual requirements are. And again, speaking to Thomas and things, it's like when you look at what you actually need to filter here, it's not complex. So let's support the simple cases in a simple way, and we can add extra complexity if we need to otherwise, but let's not lose those. Decomposing subscriptions, this was about data providers. This is about the one where I said you've got the big tree of data and you want to be able to return subsets of that efficiently. So you've got different providers of data, they can stream it out efficiently as separate messages. So we want to get the aspects of that correct such that we can do it, but then the clients receiving that data can understand the context of it, in which ways it's being provided, and know what data it's replacing or updating. So that's still got some more work to do and figure out exactly what level we need. And that does depend on how you consume the data. If you sort of combine it, it's like a union way, these different subsets of data, then it's fine. It doesn't matter too much. But if you're doing any sort of replace operation, you need to know what it is you're replacing. Some of the other ones is like cleaning up the data model a bit. So Yang subscriber notifications uses numerical IDs as the index. I'd rather move it to names, like most configuration things using names is more meaningful. So that would be useful. But we also have this question, somebody's requested to support multiple wildcards in the filter. That's a nice idea. It has some advantages to it, but it brings in some disadvantages. It adds some complexity into how you map the basically the subscription IDs and names to those sorts of things. So there's more discussion to be had there, and there's different views at the moment as to whether we just try and keep it really simple, which I can sort of see, or whether we need to keep this open in future. So some more work there. There's discussion on the update message. So we're already doing a new update message that's built on top of the envelope draft from Alex, and that's going to be mandatory for this protocol. There's a new update message that we want to combine on change and periodic using the same structure. So that's what we're trying to align and make sure we can do that. And we'll lose Yang patch, for example. It would be much simpler in terms of what we're trying to do. But again, there's some work to sort of figure out exactly what we do there. We're discussing today about whether you return the JSON from the root of the tree, or do you allow a prefix to be specified? Do you allow multiple updates within a single message, which doesn't make sense for the periodic updates, but it does make more sense for like an on-change message, where if you've got 2,000 things changing, can you return those in a single message rather than multiple ones? And in particular, the one for that I worry about is if you subscribe to configuration, having them in a single batch probably might be important. And last one on the slide is constraints on multiple receivers. So again, we think we want to support multiple receivers, but you may constrain what those are. So Joe, do you want to take, now's a good point, I think. I'm pretty much, yeah.
Joe Clark. Thanks, Rob. I really like this. First of all, let me state that. Minor thing, there is a relatively new RFC 9535 on JSON path. I don't know if you saw that. It has regular expression support. It may be too complex for what you want to do. But my bigger comment is after listening to Dhruv talk yesterday at OpsOg about a plethora of choice in this area in terms of protocols, in terms of ways of doing this. I like that you're engaging operators. Thomas might be the unicorn in the room in how much he's using model-driven management. Is there consideration given to a migration path? How would you provide out of the gate tooling for operators to make use of this, to maybe move from a fledgling Yang push implementation to Yang push light? Is this just your goal of simplicity is great, but is adding yet another thing without consideration of operational impact the right answer? Maybe you'll figure it out with operational considerations, but just something to keep in mind.
Okay, so to your two questions, JSON path, I'm aware of it. I haven't read the spec. I'm nervous of going down JSON path because I think we'll end up in the same rat hole that XPath's taken us to. I think we want to end up with something that is actually tied to Yang rather than a given encoding. So that's that one.
Simple answer. Thanks.
And in terms of migration, yes, in a sense, we are trying to be careful with that. We're not trying to make gratuitous changes or change too much. So there's that conversation and balance. We're trying to figure out what changes we can make to make it better. I think we have a Yang push implementation and we would expect to migrate to this Yang push Lite. So we have, like from an implementation perspective, I have a vested interest in terms of not trying to create too much difference and too much churn. And in terms of some of the options we're discussing, like supporting whether you encode the JSON data from the root of the tree or not, then again, when I was chatting to Thomas, he said, well, we should make that optional. We should have a path so that it makes it easier for people who are coming in to do that. I'm about to
I
run out
think
of
some
time.
hackathon projects about porting existing tooling in parallel with this would be interesting.
Yes, yeah. I'll stop this. There's one more question. I'll stop on this slide in terms of if you want to look at it, this is the sections to look at. So I'll point them out here. There are more details in the rest of this slide deck in terms of what's changing, but really look at those sections of the drafts because they're more up to date. I've missed a question. Per, do you want to? Am I out of time?
Yes, so apparently I jumped the queue as I'm a working group chair, but I'll let Joe go before. So because I have a contributor question, when you have, you don't have the subscriptions container anymore, you call it data store telemetry, I think, where you have the bookkeeping of the, yes. So how will you solve keeping, because that is config true, right? Because that is where you configure your configured subscriptions. So how will you solve that for the dynamic subscriptions, which would be operational data?
So
that has been a trouble in our implementation.
So that would use NMDA. So you'd use an operational state data store for the reporting the operational data view, and that list of subscriptions would be both for configured and dynamic. And that's one of the reasons for lining the name. So the using a string for the name would be also effectively you generate a string name for the dynamic subscriptions as well. I said dynamic, yes, the ones that come in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. And now we're moving into our last presentation, or actually there's two presentations, but it's a combo presentation. So I'm not sure if everyone wanted to come up at the same time. So if you may recall, at the end of last time's session in Dublin, I'd mentioned that there's students from university in India. Mohit is their professor, and he has a grant to bring them to IETF. And before they were reporting on please come up. They were reporting on implementation that they had done and some analysis of the results that they got there. But now they're stepping up into actually writing a draft. So very exciting. You do have 5 more minutes, so pace yourself. Here's the clicker.
So hi everyone, I'm Siddharth and we're a team of university students from NITK in Mangalore in India. So we're here to talk about the HTTPS notif draft, the implementation of that draft, and also additional Kafka integration we've done along with that in our implementation, and some analysis we've done on bandwidth. So we're here because of help from Kent and Mahesh and support from our professor Mohit Tailiani. We'll get straight to the point. A quick overview of the draft. It's a configure subscription model. So the publisher can be configured to send subscriptions to a receiver. So initially it sends a GET request to learn the capabilities. So what does a publisher support? Once you understand what a receiver supports, once the publisher understands what a receiver supports, it can constantly send, let's say, a scenario where we have telemetry data. You constantly publish this data to the receiver, and the data itself is a Yang defined notification data. So this is our architecture, which
Hello everyone. I'll be going through the implementation, the architecture we have implemented. So our application is a Flask HTTPS web server, and we have two. Our collector has two endpoints. Has given in the draft the capabilities endpoint and the relay notifications endpoint. The capabilities endpoint is for for capabilities discovery of the collector by the publisher, and the relay notification is where the publisher sends the notification after the capabilities discovery. So when the collector receives a notification, it validates this notification based on the Yang data model, and then and basically it sends it to 204 accept 204 response back to the publisher. So now we have taken inspiration from the Yang push data Yang push architecture for terms of Kafka integration. And this Kafka, the Kafka, so for storing data, for storing these, for storing the notifications, we use TSDB, or the time series database, with Kafka as a message broker. And the the collector basically publishes the notifications to a Kafka topic, and the Kafka consumer reads from subscribes to this Kafka topic, and reads it and it reads it from this Kafka topic. And so that's for the for the Kafka integration part. So we'll go to monitoring the metrics. Yeah. So for monitoring the metrics, we use the Prometheus client libraries in Python, and these libraries. We use this to define the metrics, like the the request latencies, the request counts, and the post request body sizes. And so the Prometheus client, the Prometheus collects these metrics from the client, from the collector. The Prometheus is used to collect the Prometheus collects these metrics exposed by the application, and then we use Grafana to visualize these metrics.
Right. So I'll be talking a bit about the performance analysis that we've done. The idea was to see which of the encoding formats would perform better at bandwidth, given that the networks could have also be constrained by the bandwidth. So we actually went for a virtual network namespace setup due to the lack of a lot of infrastructure. So here's the architecture that we came up with, where we had a publisher namespace and a collector namespace, and a bridge connecting both of them. We ran the publisher in the publisher namespace, so we ran 100 threads of the publisher sending notifications to simulate them. All of them are connected using virtual Ethernets. And for rate limiting the bandwidth, we've used the token bucket filter queuing discipline, where we use the bandwidth parameter to keep changing it. And here are the results that we've obtained. So the HTTPS native draft initially supports the JSON and XML encoding schema, and we can see that on lower bandwidths, clearly JSON has higher requests per second, or it's directly proportional to the throughput or the amount of data transferred on the network compared to XML. It is reasonably because XML is more verbose in nature, which would mean that it would be bigger, and because the network is constrained, there's less bandwidth, you would be able to send more JSON requests than XML requests. We'd also had this idea because of adding another widely used sort of encoding schema, CBAR, and we'd also tested with that. The green color corresponds to CBAR, orange to XML, and blue to JSON. And these results sort of reinforce the fact that when on lower bandwidths, when there's like network restrictions, the CBAR encoding performs better than the JSON encoding, which performs better than the XML encoding. And on higher bandwidths, when bandwidth is no longer, so when network is no longer a restriction, it's the processing speed of the libraries that would come into picture. And you can see that the results are almost similar. Like as we keep increasing bandwidth, the throughput doesn't increase as much because it has reached the performance limitation of the system. Right. So we went ahead and proposed the draft for it, which would be presented.
Yeah, so in addition to the implementation that we've done, we also proposed we also proposed a 0.0 draft called CBAR encoding for HTTPS-based transport for YANG notifications. The main advantage of using HTTPS to send YANG notifications is that it maximizes transport level interoperability, and it also supports variety of encoding options. So the current draft only supports JSON and XML. So we want to propose a CBAR as well, support for CBAR as well. As we already saw in the results, CBAR performs very well compared to XML and JSON, especially in lower bandwidth networks. So in accordance to the RFC 9254, we propose usage of both SIDs or schema identifiers in keys and names in keys for CBOR encoding. So this is just a brief overview of our draft. So the Yang notifications, as already mentioned, can be encoded in CBOR using names or schema identifiers as keys. And also in our draft, we've given examples for the GET and POST requests and replies, both encoded in CBOR with like names as keys and SIDs as keys. So one thing that we aim to do in the near future is to compare the performance between these two encodings. We think that the SIDs as keys will have a greater performance just because of the payload size decreasing. But we also have to see how much greater the performance will be and if it justifies the increase in complexity. And that's what we aim to do in the near future. This is.
So yeah, clearly it was not a bed of roses. We did face a couple of issues. There's a lack. There is, I don't want to say a lack of support, but there are a couple of things missing in the tooling for Yang in general. So, for example, one issue we faced is there's no support for Yang data structure extensions module. Why is this relevant? Because I come to another point, which that there is no notification Yang model defined in the draft itself. So we decided to use the Yang data model using A343, RSC A343 for network interface management. But again, I believe Alex has worked on a draft for Yang data model for RESTConf notifications. But again, that uses the Yang data structure extensions module SX structure, and there is no support for that in YangSon or LibYang. So again, Thomas, I think, suggested that we could do this ourselves by adding validation support. So that's the other issue, that there's a lack of support for XML and CBOR Yang data validation. So given data in CBOR, there is no such existent tool which can validate it against an existing Yang model, even big libraries like YangSon and LibYang. So that is something which we ourselves could potentially do. And again, so what we ended up doing is converting the CBOR or XML data back to JSON, which definitely added some overhead, right? Might have screwed our numbers, but yeah, we've taken care of subtracting all of this unnecessary overhead and focusing on the networking bandwidth. So the key takeaway was that in lower bandwidths, the size of the packet matters. So CBOR clearly wins because it gives you an overall reduced size in the amount of reduced size per request. And CBOR instead hypothetically should be better because it's an even bigger reduction in the size, because the keys are no longer ASCII text, they are simply identifiers. So we also have some areas to work on. I believe we could get a better experimentation setup. Instead of setting up namespaces, we could have a realistic multi-device setup, because there are quite a lot of uncertainties and overheads while running it on a local system. We don't know what the operating system is doing under the hood. We're not sure what IO and disk, all of this is going on. So something on a realistic network probably should give us a better idea. But I think that will simply corroborate our results, which we have already obtained. One more, yeah, I've already discussed the CBOR SIDs versus named identifiers. One more thing we plan to do is work on testing compression. So HTTP header, add gzip compression, test the throughput, remove the compression, test the throughput, and see how compression works with this draft, with and without. That's about it. I think I don't have. Yeah,
We have some questions in the queue.
Yeah.
Per.
Rob is before me.
Yeah, I was going to repeat the thank you. I think it's great where certainly students and things that are implementing the draft and bringing the results to the IETF. I think it's really good to do that. And as we mentioned in other cases here, where you implement these drafts and find the nits and the problems, that really helps make them more mature and things like that. And my other question, you've pretty much answered it right at the last point when you said about using compression. So I was going to suggest that you use gzip compression both for across XML and JSON and CBOR, both with and without SIDs, to look at the overheads of both the encoding overheads for those different protocols and also on the wire, because I know there's some indications that, for example, JSON plus compression is as effective as CBOR and things. So it'd be good to see the actual figures and what comes out of that. Thank you.
Makes sense.
Okay, Kent, as a contributor, I have both a question and a comment. The question is, with the Kafka implementation, was encryption turned on between the publisher and the collector?
Yes.
Okay. TLS?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, and then the comment, to Rob's point of increasing your test matrix, with the compression turned on or not. Also, it'd be good to try various versions of HTTP, right? So HTTP1, HTTP2, HTTP3, 3 being quick, of course. And so it'd be interesting to get that added to your test matrix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agree. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Per, Cisco, thank you very much for an awesome presentation and implementation of the draft. I think I validate XML and Yang with libyang too, with YangLint. So I'm surprised that you can't. I think that you can do that, or we do at least.
Okay, we will look into that.
Yep.
XML and JSON, I don't think is an issue. CBOR is really where things get harder. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that I can understand.
Yeah.
Counts as a contributor. It just popped back in the queue. You mentioned difficulty in validating the structures because the libraries wouldn't support it. One trick is to convert the Yang where it says structure, convert it to a container, and then validate it that way. Okay.
That is what we've done currently.
Hmm?
That is what we've done currently, but I mean, there was no tooling, so we had to modify the Yang ourselves, which sounded not right. So yeah.
I can say that for Yanger, another Yang compiler, we have support for augment structure and this, but I don't know if we've pushed it yet or if we just have it in-house. Can look into that.
Yeah, I think there is support for tooling, but it's very spread out. Like I think structure is supported in Yang Kit, which is in Java, and we're trying to use Python, and most of the standard supports in libyang and C. So I don't think there's like a centralized tool, or like there should be one proper thing that we could use. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. We actually came right in on time. I don't believe there's any remain. Oh, I actually have one question. So for for Mahesh. Now we have another AD, Med, and it's traditionally a split, management versus operations. Will that split continue and your focus is management, or will we be looking at a joined relationship between you and Med as far as the ADs for this working group?
So as of now, we're going to continue the same. Let Med come up to speed, then we can decide whether we want to merge or continue with the split or not.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. See you on the list. Yeah.